Okay, chapter 7. Don't waste your time fighting your identity challengers or haters, like I like to call them. So I mentioned in the last chapter that in high school, my nickname was Los, because my name is Carlos. So for short, some of my friends or homies call me Los. Okay, so I was C-Los to them sometimes. Sometimes they even called me C-Mex. C-Mex, on the other hand, was an abbreviation that had to do with my identity. Okay, so it stood for Carlos for Mexicans, so C-Mex. Of all the things I protected from others, for example, I protected my residency status. What that means is I still was working on my green card in high school. I still didn't have it, but I didn't tell anybody about it. I thought I was embarrassed by the fact that I wasn't a legal person in this country. I was working on it. I was going to the INS in San Jose downtown station, and I was filling in my paperwork, but I still didn't have it. So I protected that because it made me feel, embarrassed. I also protected from others the fact that at the time I felt like useless because my father made me feel worthless with some of the things he used to say to me. I also didn't tell others that I was not very good with girls. Obviously, you don't want to, with your homies, you don't want to sound like, you can't mac. That's how we used to say it. You can't talk to girls. And also, remember I talked about my intelligence and how I felt inferior to some of my smarter friends? That's yet another thing I didn't reveal to everyone. Okay? But there was one thing, guys, that I protected even more than all those things. And that was my ethnic identity. I could hide everything else, but not how I look. It's called phenotype in science. Your phenotype is how you look out on the outside. So I am, and was obviously at the time, a fair-skinned Latino. Okay, as a young man, I used to wish I had been born a little darker, and let me tell you why. Okay. My skin color to this day, well, not to this day anymore, I'm comfortable now, but back then in middle school and in high school, it was the biggest contradiction in my life. I felt like I had to prove who I was to everyone because, you see, I would meet new kids and they'd say, "You're Mexican?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then after I had to prove it by speaking in Spanish, and otherwise they wouldn't believe me. They would say, "Well, you look very white." And you know what? That may not sound like a bad thing now, but back in those times, race-conscious kids were everywhere. Race-conscious is still something here, even in today, in this year, right? But I don't know if it is as much as it was back in my time, because I'm not hanging out with you guys. But hearing it a dozen times or more all the time, every week, whatever, it made me feel insecure about me. And I got totally fed up with it. So I decided I was going to create a mask. Not an actual physical mask you put on, but something, like a metaphorical mask to hide my insecurity. So I started calling myself C-Mex. I would tell others to call me C-Mex. And I would say, "Call me C-Mex because I'm defender of Mexican rights." So I had to be the most Mexican kid at my school. I pinned, get this, a small Mexican flag to the back of my backpack. So everywhere I went, they go, "Oh, there goes C-Los or C-Mex," right? In class, I'd interrupt my white teachers by saying something Mexican had accomplished. Like, "Oh, Mexicans invented bubblegum." If the teacher was being what I thought was racist, I'd say, "Oh, Mexicans helped invent TV." I'd come up with some strange facts, that had no bearing whatsoever to the lesson, but because I felt that I had to prove that I was defending Mexican rights to my peers in the class, I would act out this way. Another one, the Mayans invented the concept of zero, so I'd say that in the math class to kind of make myself be more Mexican, right? Or sound more Mexican. I'd say to my history teacher, "Did you know the U.S. stole California, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, and parts of Texas from Mexico? That used to be Mexico." But I would say it out loud and interrupt the teacher in history class just to sound more Mexican, right? And so word of this spread around the school. And so the C-Mex nickname, it stuck because I was saying these things in class all the time. And I get in trouble for it. I get kicked out sometimes because, you know, the teacher's like, okay, I've had enough, you know. So my new super Mexican identity came at a huge cost to me. Why? Because I lost hours of learning time waiting for my teacher to come outside and talk to me once they kicked me out because they were just annoyed by me, okay? I also had to have a strong comeback every time a friend like that wasn't Mexican, another ethnic group we had at our school were Vietnamese students because I'm from San Jose, and they would constantly, this is how we interacted back then, we'd constantly make racial jokes. That's how we were back in the 90s. It's probably not like that anymore, but that's how we were in the 90s. And so they'd say something like, you know, hey, you dropped your taco. Hey, you dropped C-Mex, you dropped your burrito. You know, and it sounds funny. I know, it sounds funny, right? It was a joke. But I had to have a comeback because you cannot not have a comeback when somebody jokes at your expense. So I would say, hey, you dropped your egg roll, right? And yeah, I know. It sounds bad, I know. But this is, guys, this is how we talked to each other back then. I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think? Does that sound kind of stupid? Yeah. But you know what? Back then, it wasn't like it is today. Back then, we could talk about each other's race comfortably. I don't know if it's like that now. With another friend who's not the same race as you, Armando? Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you guys are comfortable around each other, right? Okay, but thank you. But you know what? Sometimes that could get out of hand, right? And it's gotten out of hand in certain high schools, especially in the Los Angeles area. I wrote a book about it, my novel, and it's gotten out of hand there. And then fights, because of the racial jokes, fights start. So, but back then, it wasn't as bad as it is today. We could get along that way. But anyway, let's go back to my identity insecurity. I know that I've worked in schools for 23 years, okay? And I know each of you might have some sort of identity crisis happening, or you may not. You might be fully comfortable right now with your identity. But let me tell you, as I mentioned on the board, between 0 and 30, those are your formative years. You're starting to learn more about who you are as a person. And let me tell you that you have a long way to go before you fully feel comfortable with you in your own skin, okay? When someone says, oh, I'm comfortable in my skin, they mean that they're comfortable with their identity, okay? But because you're young still, you might be in a vulnerable stage in life. And it's easy, let me tell you, it's easy, because I've seen it out there, for others to push your buttons with respect to your identity, okay? So let's say, for example, these are some that I've heard, okay? I've heard that sometimes mixed people, like mixed kids, half white, half black, or half Filipino, half white, or half Mexican, half this, okay? Sometimes they get pushed, their buttons get pushed by other kids because they might not be accepted as part of the group, right? Like they're mixed black, white, they might not be accepted by the full black kids. Or if they're mixed Mexican, white, they might not be accepted by the Mexican kids. And mixed kids have a, you know, that's one thing that I have to look out for my own kids because they're half black, half Mexican. So I got to make sure that when they're going through high school, they don't have this identity crisis where they don't know who to hang out with because they're mixed. Will they be accepted? I have concerns for them. Will they be accepted by the Mexican kids because they don't speak Spanish, my kids, because they're half black? Will they be accepted by the black kids because my kids are light skinned, they're not very black, they're not, because I gave them my genes too, so they're not very black. So I have those concerns for my own kids. But I already know that there's kids like that in schools today, okay, that might be going through that type of identity crisis, okay? Another type of identity crisis might be that you might decide to be more academic. And if you come from the hood and you start to hang out with more academic kids, or you start to hang out with some more rich kids at the school, you might be called a sellout, okay? What sellout means, you're not hanging out with people in your economic area, okay? You're selling out. They might say, oh, you're a sellout because I see you hanging out with that kid and he's the rich kid, you know, and blah, blah, blah. You're a sellout. Okay, so they're trying to push your buttons, right? They're trying to put you down for doing that. What else? the athletes, right? If you try to hang out with athletes and you're not an athlete, okay, you might see yourself as an athlete. You might have the identity crisis that was described in the video we just saw, where that's all you are is an athlete in your mind. So when things go wrong in the athletic arena, let's say you get an injury, you feel really depressed because that's who you are. You're the hooper, you're the baller, the football player. You know, that's you. That's how the kids know you. And if you are not doing well in that sport, all of a sudden it makes you feel like you're having a crisis. Okay, so moving on. So I allowed myself to get my buttons pushed because of my skin. Now, guys, now I am comfortable. Now, there's still a lot of Latinos out there that aren't understanding the situation. I understand my situation. I realize I'm a white Mexican, okay? I realize that if I go to Mexico, because of the caste system that was brought by the Spanish, I realize that in my home country of Mexico, where I was born, people like me are more likely to be on TV, to be on the novelas, to be shown on, you know, as part of the government, you know, above. And I understand that I have a responsibility to be aware of that, okay, as a white Mexican. So does that mean everybody in my family is like me? No, absolutely not, because the Mexican genetics, weird and strange. For example, my uncle, which is my dad's brother, he's very dark. My dad is the white one in the family, okay? They call him a güero. You might have heard that name. If you're Mexican, you might have heard the word, we call him güero because he's light skinned, okay? So, but I'm comfortable now. I understand what's going on, okay? But you might not. So here are some tips. If your identity crisis revolves around your skin color, for whatever reason, understand this. We are all made up of genes. In science, there is no race. In science, everybody is human, Homo sapien. So there is no distinction in science between you and me. We're both human, okay? So it's called Homo sapien. So this whole thing about race, that came around by powerful people that wanted to discriminate and wanted to exploit other people. That was invented by bad humans, race, okay? Also, there's no single representation of a culture. Also, here's this. Large sums of money, get this. Rich people, they don't care what ethnicity you are if you're rich, okay? Money is green. So if you make lots of money, hey, all this other stuff goes away. I also know there's other people who look like me, and I know now, and I'm telling you, there's other kids that are also working on their identity as well at school. So don't feel alone. You're not. Don't feel ashamed for not falling, you know, within the standards of someone else's measure of ethnicity, if that's the case. Ask yourself a question. Why am I doing this? If the answer doesn't hit you right away, come back to the question later. But be sure to keep at it. Keep learning. Keep exploring. Keep working it out. As you discover more and more about yourself, you're going to be more comfortable in your own skin. Okay? And we'll talk about selling out and selling in later. Thank you.